The pomp and ceremony of King Charles III's coronation is over, but the spectacle has reignited debates about slavery, colonial legacies, and republicanism. Many have pledged their allegiance to the King, including Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese.
I now invite those who wish to offer their support to do so by joining in saying, "God save King Charles" at the end.
This act of allegiance was described as crucial by members of the Australian government, but this act and the coronation has stirred up mixed emotions and responses in Australia among Indigenous and First Nations people, shedding light on the country's colonial history. I spoke with National President of the Black People's Union, Kieran Stewart Asherton, on people's response to King Charles III's coronation.
So we organised an event down here in Naarm, in Fitzroy. We just wanted to, have a bit of a family-friendly event where we could make a bit of a joke about the whole coronation, but also open up discussions to what Australia's future might look like as a republic moving away from the monarchy.
How does this event or the occasion of the coronation ignore Australia's history in terms of Indigenous sovereignty?
We've been colonised here for 235 years, and it's quite sycophantic, in my opinion, that there's people in Australia who still, worship the monarchy and who still believe in that system despite the impact that system has had around the world. Like at its height, the English Empire was the largest empire this world has ever known. They ruled over a quarter of the world's land space and a quarter of the world's population. And the only reason they managed to get to that level in the first place is through genocidal massacres and massive campaigns across the world where they'll go in and steal people's land, steal people's labour, steal people's lives, steal their children, commit all these horrible, horrible atrocities.
In the sovereignty event that was hosted by Black People's Union, what was discussed when it came to the Treaty for First Nations people?
So we just discussed, how a treaty could be one of the ways that we move forward as a nation, away from a colony of the Commonwealth to being our own sovereign republic. If that was a route we were to go down, we could potentially use a treaty as the founding document for whatever new nation, was born out of this continent. But just along the lines of treaty, I suppose the Black People's Union take a bit of a different stance to treaty than the one that's been traditionally pushed by Aboriginal activists and organisers.
Mm-hmm.
We're of the opinion that we shouldn't be entering into a treaty with the colonial government. We should instead be entering into inter-clan treaties so that we can create a pan-Aboriginal movement across the continent, bring all of our mob together, and be in a lot stronger position to actually enforce our sovereignty and, be self-determinant people. We believe that entering into a treaty with the government is a bit of a futile effort, and it's a continuation of the colonial agenda. There's a history of broken treaties with Indigenous people right around the world in every single colonised nation. And if you look at all these other Indigenous groups around the world that do have treaties, you see the same sort of trends that we have here in Australia in terms of disproportionate incarceration, poor health, disproportionate homelessness. Treaties haven't given them equality. We should have treaties between different Indigenous nations across Australia. And that way, our people can actually have that unity and that cooperation to be able to have a greater impact on the government, resist colonisation even better.
And lastly, what are your thoughts about Australia's future as a republic? You mentioned this a little bit briefly, but if you could explain what are your thoughts about this?
The republic is the future of this nation. We will move away from the monarch at one point or another. It's just, when we do that and how we do that is the big question here. To paraphrase Uncle Robbie Thorpe the other day, he said something along the lines of, why do people still believe in kings and queens? Like, do these people believe in fairies as well? Belief in this higher authority imbued in the form of man. And that is something that is counterintuitive to our culture as Indigenous people. And not to mention, the impacts that this material condition ends up having across the world when you do put these people into positions of power and authority over others and over land and over capital.
How responsive do you think Australians are to the ideas of the treaties between Indigenous communities and Australia as being a republic? How responsive do you think the public is with your experiences, your knowledge, and your interactions with the community?
It's a pretty mixed response, to be honest. There's people who do support stuff like treaties who you might not necessarily think would support something like that. reforms like the voice referendum. There's a lot of people who support that, but also support a treaty, despite these two things being at opposite ends with each other. And the same as the Republic, they've got a lot of people, even right-wingers, for example, who are supportive of Australia moving away from the monarchy and forming its own republic.
That was National President of the Black People's Union, Kieran Stewart Asherton, speaking with me about the Black People's Union's response to the ceremony of King Charles III's coronation.